Hey folks, we're just going to let everyone get on to the webinar. So just be a couple of minutes before we get started. Thanks. We're just giving everyone a minute to get on. So we will get started in 1 minute. Thank you, everyone. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Von Felden, and I am the director of the Rare Disease Legislative Advocates Program at the Every Life Foundation. Thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar the week before Thanksgiving. Kudos to all of you for joining us on this beautiful November day. In case your Wi-Fi is a little fuzzy, you can call in to the webinar. So there's the details in case you want to jot them down. If you do have any questions during the webinar for the speakers or for the RDLA staff, myself, Caitlin are both on here. Please feel free to use the Q&A and chat feature in Zoom, and we will either answer them via the chat function or we'll post those questions to the speakers after their presentations. And if we do have any media joining us today, thank you for participating. We just ask that you not take any of direct quotes from the presentations and encourage you to follow up with the speakers afterwards. So today we're joined by Nicholas Minetto with Favorite Drinking Consulting. He's going to talk about this mysterious appropriations process and how patient advocates can support appropriations requests. And Jen Bernstein is going to help us understand what happened just a couple of weeks ago, which seemed to last a very long time, and help give us some more clarification on what that impact is on healthcare policy in the next Congress. And then I'm just going to give you some details about our events for 2021. So Nicholas, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Sounds great. Looking forward to the discussion. So I know that on the topic of appropriations, we have a variety of diversity of folks on these calls. You know, some of you are very expert and well experienced in the process. Others may be wondering what this is all about. So I'm going to provide just a high-level overview of the process and then look forward to a conversation from there. So in thinking about the federal appropriations process, I think it's really about showing you the money, show me the money. And I put a couple photos here that I'm probably dating myself because this is from the movie, of course, Jerry Maguire, but I recognize there's probably a subset of folks on this call who may not know what that movie was. So this was a movie that came out, I think I was a senior or junior in high school. I think it was like 95, maybe 96, 97. So, more than 20, 23 years ago, but it had a famous line here, show me the money, where Tom Cruise as a sports agent was asked to prove his worth to a budding football player, and you had to basically repeat over and over again, show me the money. And that's essentially what federal appropriations is all about. It's showing everyone the money. It's the process by which Congress actually appropriates or allocates money to support a wide array of federal programs, departments, and agencies. Go into the next slide, and I'll just, at the front end, I'll throw in a few other caveats here. First and foremost is that the budget and appropriations process really doesn't work the way it's supposed to work on paper. It's one of those things, just like, there's the how a bill became a law that all of us who work in policy know is really often not exactly the way things happen. And I think it's very apt to say that things are very different, usually very different in appropriations. Actually, when you look at the past several decades, there's been very few years where Congress has done what it's supposed to do entirely and on time. And it gets to the point that when they actually do things on time in accordance with the schedules that are spelled out in various laws and directives, it actually makes news, such as a couple years back when they actually did a big spending bill, the bill that funds the Department of Health and Labor and Health and Human Services, Labor and Education, as well as the Defense Department. They actually did that before the fiscal year expired. And that was, again, quite newsworthy because it was such an anomaly for those of us who watch this and engage in this process year over year. And we have a lot of uncertainty as we look to the new year, the new Congress, some changes on the Appropriations Committee, and the overall question about what exactly this divided government will bring. So going forward, on the high level appropriations, it is interesting because this actually is spelled out in a very high level in the Constitution. So this means that Congress has the authority in Article 1 to spend your money. And the direct quote again, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. So that really is the key here in terms of why Congress has to do this. And they have to do it every year to make the government continue to run. It's a lengthy process that is supposed to start with the president's budget request that goes to Congress, and that usually or is supposed to go out in early February, but often, as I noted, can arrive late. And this is essentially the president's recommendation as to what they would like to see Congress spend money on. But as you know, Congress has its own ideas, or several ideas, or 538 ideas about what they would like to spend their money on. And that's why a lot of times Congress will spend much time working on their own view. Sometimes this gets us a budget resolution, which lays out essentially a blueprint that will then be followed by the appropriations committees who actually put together individual spending bills. Right now, there are a dozen bills that fund all the governments, the departments, the agencies, and the programs. So these bills can cover either one department or agency, or they can cover several. And for the purposes of this discussion, I put here a few of the most important bills. The Labor, HHS, and Education bill is probably our most important bill for most of it, not everyone on this call. That funds the Department of Health, most of the Department of Health, the CDC, the NIH, and many other agencies and programs. Then you've got this Agriculture FDA bill, which funds the Food and Drug Administration. And then I know many of you also work with the Department of Defense and their peer review medical research program. So that's just a little summary. There's not one single bill technically. Oftentimes these can be packaged up in a single bill, but that's part of the complexity of this process because Congress does have to work on multiple bills. And this is just a little schematic again showing, like I spoke about a moment ago, how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have a nice little budget go from the White House to the Congress in early February, and then Congress will work up a budget resolution and do some additional hearings about the budget and offer their thoughts. And then sometime in the latter part of spring, early summer, the Appropriations Committee should pass their bills so that ideally these all get nice and neatly resolved and reconciled well in advance of the end of September when they can be signed into law and actually funding the government before the fiscal year prior expires. But again, this is the supposed to work slide, not how it actually works. So going on to our next slide, just a few other terms here that can be that are relevant to know as you think about appropriations. Authorization versus appropriation, or authorizing versus appropriation. So Congress can and does pass a lot of different legislation that creates policies or programs or requires agencies or departments to do certain things. But for most of those laws to actually work, particularly any law that creates a program, they need money. And that's where the appropriations process comes in, because most bills, some do, but not all, but most bills do not authorize and appropriate at the same time. So that means that every year Congress has to pass appropriations bills to actually fund what other Congress and what other congressional committees and what other laws have actually created. There's also a question, sometimes you hear people say, well, discretionary versus mandatory spending. So the appropriations bills cover only discretionary spending. That means the money that's not entitlement spending or that's not automatically required to be spent under various laws. So The mandatory category is actually the most significant part of federal spending. For mandatory, think about programs like Social Security checks, like Medicare benefits, like veterans benefits. Those get paid out regardless. Congress could do nothing. They still have to fund the operations. So I guess they do have to do something because you have to have people who actually run the programs. But they, on day in, day out, they could not touch those entitlement benefits, and they would still be paid out as they're supposed to do because they are mandatory programs. And again, about 60% of the federal budget, federal spending, is in the mandatory or entitlement program. So less than half is what we focus on every year collectively. And then, you've probably heard the term, those of you who've been around for a while know, have heard of, or are familiar with earmarks. Essentially, this is direct funding from Congress, where Congress writes into an appropriations bills that they want to see a certain amount of money go toward a certain program, project, sometimes even a direct recipient. They were very popular, about two decades ago. They've been limited over the past decade because of some abuses and some other challenges. There's a potential that they may come back. There's talk about them being resurrected. It's like the vampire that won't die. Every couple of years, Congress likes to think about bringing these back. They are popular for members, so it's something to keep an eye on as we head into the uncertainties of the new year. We'll go to the next slide. Again, this is just a little schematic showing that more than half, more than 60% of money tends to go to the mandatory policy, and that a relatively small chunk of that whole is on discretionary, but that's where we tend to focus our energies on. Go over to the next slide here, and then just a little bit of a deeper dive here. So the president's budget, so you might think, well, why are you budgeting, and what's budget versus appropriations? Well, the budget is essentially the high level spending plan, often very heavily oriented by political ideology and budgetary views. So this is where the administration comes out and says, under our budget, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and all these great things. We're going to balance the budget in X number of years. We're going to cut the debt. We're going to make everyone happy, blah, blah, blah. This is their spending plan where they put out their marker and their priority. So it's not uncommon at times for the administration to be very politically wise in putting together their budget, because if they want to go for a certain message about reducing the deficit or being able to cut taxes, then they're going to have to do certain things to make that happen. So a lot of times the budgets tend to be, again, highly political in nature. And they also will often, and this is administrations of either party, will often cut or reduce funding for agencies and programs that they know are very popular and that Congress will ultimately restore funding for. So the budget is the starting point of the process. It's the administration's thinking and their view as to how they would like to see things operate, but it's by no means the end of the process. And going over to the next slide, the Congress again comes in. The Budget Committee is supposed to do a lot of work here. They'll hold hearings. Many of the appropriations committees and subcommittees will hold hearings where they'll bring various cabinet secretaries and agency heads and other folks to come together and talk about their budget, and they'll be grilled and pressed on all sorts of member questions and priorities. And when you have in some cases, in the best of cases, when things work somewhat right, or as they are supposed to, Congress will actually put together a budget resolution, ideally one that's agreed to by both the House and Senate, that sets their parameters and their priorities, and that importantly sets a top line spending number, because that top line number will then be used by the appropriations committees, ideally, to put together their various spending bills. And a lot of the challenges that we have here these days are because we don't have agreement on even the top level spending numbers. This is something that's actually pending right now. One of the big questions around getting FY21 fully resolved is actually coming to an agreement here in late November on top level and then secondary spending levels. So it can be very challenging when you don't have a budget resolution to work off of, especially when you have, even more so when you have different balances of power in a chamber. We'll go over to the next slide here. And on this one, I think just really visually saying, if you think about budget versus appropriating, well, what's one mean? What's the other mean? I think of the budget as being something, if you're comparing it to your own household, you put together your high level of categories, your mortgage, your food, your entertainment, your education, whatever it may be. And then, you know, that's the budget part. And then I think of appropriations a bit like that very granular list. You know, here's our grocery list. We need, you know, 3 jars of sauce. We need 2 boxes of spaghetti. We need 4 things of water, whatever it may be, where you get to that line item level. Because while the appropriations bills fund the departments, they fund the agencies, they get down to the very programmatic level. You're talking, you know, sub $1 million marks here in many cases where they're actually putting that level of detail into the legislation or the corresponding report. So the appropriations would be the grocery list item here where you're getting into high level of detail. Go over to the next slide here. And again, just while we've talked a lot about how things often don't work out, here's how we often see things play out. So like we're talking about right now, here we are in late November, and we are still talking about FY21 bills, even though FY21 started in October. And at best, this won't be fully resolved until, you know, about another month or so from now. So when appropriations bills are completed late, that can often delay the issuance of the president's budget, particularly when these bills go into the new calendar year, then it really can push the budget back. Like I mentioned, you often have a history here where Congress is not able to agree on a joint resolution. That then makes it really challenging because a lot of times the appropriations committees are playing with different numbers. So if you think about in a household, if one spouse had one set of numbers and another had another set of numbers, it probably doesn't work out very well if everyone's spending a different amount of money or has a different budget in mind for a project or for a shopping list. So that's essentially what happens here in Congress when they don't have agreement. You've got wide discrepancies between bills and chambers. A lot of times these bills are only debated in one chamber, or maybe they're not debated or advanced at all. And just, you know, very quite apropos here, just last week, the Senate Appropriations Committee released all 12 of their FY21 spending bills, more than a month after the start of the fiscal year, but another indicator of how the process often doesn't work at all how it's envisioned. And then when you come around, you know, late August or September, there's usually very little progress toward completing bills. So what you end up having here is like we've had under what we're under right now, is where Congress essentially passes a continuing resolution or a stopgap bill that funds the government to another point in time to prevent a government shutdown. And when agreements aren't reached, we have a total government shutdown or a partial government shutdown. And this unfortunately has become more common in recent years, with the most recent, you know, I'll put quote partial shutdown because several departments and agencies were affected, was playing out, you know, really just 2 years ago or less than 2 years ago, late 2018 into January of 2019, and it lasted for more than a month. So unfortunately, the wheels often do come off the car here, and we have more often than not some of these challenges playing out. We'll go down to the next slide just to bring everything in here to wrap it up. Sorry. So again, why bother? You might say, well, why am I going to even bother doing all this? Well, again, first and foremost, these bills are the only way to fund the government, and it's important for anyone who has an interest here to be engaged in the process. These bills are also often viewed as the only or one of the few, quote, must pass pieces of legislation. So it's an opportunity for you to engage on a bill that, you know, at some level, even if it's very late in the game and much later than what is supposed to happen, it will get done at some level during a year. So it's important to play for that reason. And then the other point here, I'll throw in another term here, again, something many of you who've been involved know well, but it's report language. This is the non-statutory or non-binding piece of appropriations bills, but that provides important directions from Congress to the various agencies and departments as to priorities and what they would like to see done. So this is a place where many in the patient advocacy world like to spend some time, because you can use that report language or guidance to grow and shape various programs and activities, particularly in areas like NIH and CDC. So it's something to take advantage of as part of your overall advocacy toolbox. And then just wrapping everything up on the next slide. Sorry, there we go. So what should you consider going? Again, first and foremost, with everything that's going on here, a lot of uncertainties, pay very close attention, including how Congress ultimately decides to move forward with appropriations, and both with the remainder of FY21 and how that gets resolved and what we'll see going forward. looking for various members who may take on new roles. There's going to be a new chairman of the House Appropriations Committee in the new year, a new chairman of the Labor Rights Subcommittee. So a lot in flux here. Re-engage again, or consider engaging on the issues of importance to you. Consider also, I think importantly here, it's not just working with Congress, but ideally you're working with your agency stakeholders as well, so that Congress is doing things that could be pushed forward and that you're going to find some people at the agency that they're going to be receptive to doing. So that's another important piece of this here. You don't want to go out and only focus on appropriations with the Hill without talking to the agency. And then again, ultimately look at appropriations as one of many tools in the toolbox. It's not by any stretch the only thing you should go about doing, but it is something to consider utilizing and as you play the overall game going forward, including looking at the long game. So I think wraps up my points. If there's any questions or comments, happy to take them, unless.
Great. No, that was very informative, Nick. I know that there was one question in the chat asking if you had advice on how to work to get report language included in an appropriations bill.
Sure. So appropriations report language, typically what you'll want to do is work with offices that you're already working with. So if you have a group of champions who are involved and engaged on your topic, start with them, start exploring with them, bring them the idea or ideas that you have. Here's what we need. This is what's happening at the agency, or this is where we could really use some support. Talk it over with them. And then ideally you'd want to think about putting together a provision or two. There's a lot of models that you can look at from what's been done in previous spending bills. So there's a big history here that it's pretty easy to find. But you want to look at how it's been done in the past. Think about what could be done to nudge what you're trying to accomplish forward. Ideally, like I mentioned earlier, something that would resonate or that should resonate with what the agency or department may already be doing or considering. Maybe they just need a little bit of a push forward, or maybe you want to take it to a higher level or build upon something that's been done a while back. Talk to the congressional offices that you're working with most. Chances are they would hopefully be receptive to working with you to put a request in. There's a whole process when it comes to appropriations requests that offices will have to submit to the Appropriations Committee. If you do a sign-on letter, which is a way to get more members engaged or supportive, there's timelines at place here. So there are a lot of nuances that you would want to be mindful of going forward. But first and foremost, I'd say think about the ideas that you may have or your needs. Start talking to some of the offices that you've been working with or that maybe care most about this topic. And then from there, it would probably evolve forward, including maybe getting to a point where you would have some direct conversations with the Appropriations Committee staff to walk them through what you're trying to achieve, giving them the rationale, and helping answer any questions they may have. So there are a lot of steps here. I don't want to make it sound overly simplified, but at the very base level, think about your idea or ideas and start talking to congressional offices about it. And keep in mind, this isn't going to be the same as passing a law that mandates X, Y, and Z. Appropriations report language can only go so far. It can be very helpful and very impactful, but it's not, I wouldn't suggest that it's a substitute for enacting a full-on legislation either.
That was, I think, a great explanation. Thank you. Perhaps there were some questions about, FY 2021. Could you give just a really quick summary of where that is right now? I mean, very basic.
Well, the December 11th is the big date, right? It's one day after my anniversary, so I'll have to remember that one. It's the day that Congress, right now, under the continuing resolution, that's when we're funded through, September 11th. So that means that really two things have to happen. One is by that date, Congress will wrap up spending bills and they'll be able to pass either around that date or a little beforehand, a complete package of FY21 spending bills. That's when it would be referred to, typically the term here that you may hear is the omnibus appropriations bills. So it means basically they'll throw all of these bills or many bills into one package, get it on the floor, get it through, and everything gets taken care of. Another scenario is that they may have to do another temporary spending bill, another stopgap measure. That could be, I think, many of us would hope that it would be short term, that maybe they need a little more time to get everything wrapped up, but they have a agreement in principle. So one scenario could be that they'll pass a short term spending bill that maybe gets them through maybe another week, maybe December 18th or 20th, while they can actually complete work on the larger complete omnibus bill. Now, if no agreement comes about and if it just proves elusive, what I think the least appealing scenario to I think many of us would be that there's a longer term continuing resolution or stopgap bill that essentially punts this into the first quarter, January, maybe even February, for Congress and the new administration to have to come back and address. I don't know of many people who really love that scenario, because even when you think about it coming in with a new Congress, a new administration, one of the least appealing things is spending ridiculous amounts of time and energy on figuring out a fiscal year that's already several months in by that point in time. So I think there is the appetite to get this done in one way or another this calendar year. But of course, whether or not we can get to the point where that happens, that's the $64,000 question there. There seem to be some positive indicators, but as we all know, it's very fluid, and a lot can erupt at a last minute to table the deal, especially when the other issue here that's related is another round of COVID related relief. Could that be a component of this larger bill? That's another, I guess I would say, complicating factor in the mix.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, Caitlin, that you see?
No, I think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate you being here today to talk about this.
If any other questions come up, feel free to send them along.
We definitely will. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Next, we have Jen Bernstein with Horizon Government Affairs to talk to us about what that election meant for all of us.
I'm sorry to have to talk about the election, because I feel like so many of us would just like to put it behind us, but it won't go away. So anyway, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jen Bernstein. I work for Horizon Government Affairs, and I also serve on the board of the Every Life Foundation. And so today I'm just going to do a little post-election analysis and a look ahead for the remainder of this year and into next year, and talk about what we might expect to see in the health policy space. Before I get into all of that, I just want to really thank Shannon for everything that she and the rest of the Every Life team have done to keep the trains moving this year. I know it has been a dumpster fire inside of a volcano that's full of sharks and murder hornets, and the year's just been crazy. And I'm glad that we've been able to just keep pushing forward on the things that we care about. I miss doing these meetings in person. I would like to see other humans besides the people who live in my house, although I love them, but we're all really sick of each other. And I hope we can see each other in person soon, and that you guys are all staying safe and healthy. Before
hey,
I start.
Yeah, your slides are like possessed. How do I get them? They keep on flipping. How do I get them to stay still for you?
I don't know. You know what? Take the slides down. I'm going to walk through everything. You don't even need to see them, and we can just post them. Would that work?
Yeah, let me see if I can get them to stay still for 1 second.
Okay, I don't know what I did, but I really suck at technology, and you'd think 8 months into this, I'd be able to not screw that up, but let me know when you want me to.
I think it's going to stay here on this slide. So
okay.
Why don't we try? Oh no, it's going to go.
So I don't know what I did. All right, well, let's take that down. I'm going to just walk through them, and then we can post them. And then if anybody has questions, you can reach out to me. All right, so the election. I think I speak for all of us when I say I'm glad it's mostly over. It's still being challenged legally, but I don't think, obviously, any of those challenges will change the results. The one really important takeaway from the election is that there was a tremendous amount of voter turnout, which is a great thing, no matter who it is that you're voting for. More women voted than men. And again, legal challenges are still coming from the Trump administration, but I don't think that any of them will change the outcome of the election. So I never quite know. I mean, I'm saying President-elect Biden, because I think that's what we're dealing with here. So there was a lot of polling prior to the election that seemed to indicate that there would be this massive blue wave that was going to sweep over the nation. And then as we see, that really didn't happen. What we saw really, when you think about it, is probably what we would have expected, that the country is just really divided. And I mean, my family is a really good microcosm of what's going on broadly in the country, and I'm dreading the holidays because it's just going to be interesting. But the country is divided and the Congress is divided. And so I'll get to that in a minute. But the race demographics for the election were basically what you probably would expect. The Trump supporters tended to be mostly male, older, white, and rural. And the Biden supporters were younger, diverse, urban and suburban, and largely women. And then Biden also captured votes from both low and high income groups. He also captured 8% of people who identify as Republicans, and independents supported Biden 51% to 37% compared to President Trump. This is interesting because there was a lot of support from Biden that came from outside of the Democratic Party. And so I would assume that that means he's likely going to almost have to include some Republicans in his administration. He has Republicans who are on his transition team right now. I've heard Meg Whitman's name be bantered around for potentially a high-level position. So I would expect to see maybe the administration reflect not only the diversity that they promised, but also maybe just the diversity of the people who supported him as well. In terms of the top issues for the incoming administration, the pandemic clearly is going to be the top issue, along with shoring up the economy, and then also strengthening the Affordable Care Act. And I just want to take a minute and mention, because I'm sure a lot of you are aware that right now the Supreme Court has heard arguments on a case dealing with the Affordable Care Act. If you just need a super quick primer on this, the background is that the case is actually about the constitutionality of the law's individual mandate, saying that you have to have health insurance. The mandate then had a tax penalty associated with it if you did not have insurance, which I'm sure all of you have seen in your tax forms. Shannon, did you get it to stop spazzing out? Maybe?
I think so. I think
okay.
So we'll
Shannon,
see.
You're amazing. Thank you. Sorry about that. I did not mean to do that to you. But so let me back up. The case is really two cases that were consolidated. It was Texas versus California and another one that I can't really remember, that is to decide whether or not the mandate itself was constitutional and whether or not the ACA can actually survive without the mandate. So going back to the tax penalty, you all have to fill out the form saying that you have insurance or you don't. And then there was a penalty that was historically assessed if you didn't. The Trump administration essentially eliminated the penalty by lowering it to zero, but the actual mandate to have the insurance itself was not eliminated. So the tax penalty was lowered, I think, 2 years ago. And I was just checking some of the data this morning on enrollment. ACA is really, looks like it's doing well. Open enrollment started on November 1st. And there were a little over 800,000 people who signed up for plans through the healthcare marketplace. And then there were about 175,000 of those were new enrollees. So the decision's not going to come from the court until June, but it's definitely something to put on the radar for next year. Okay, can we see what's on the next slide? Okay. So I can speak from experience that in our office, we sometimes have a hard time trying to hire one person. Now imagine that you have to fill 4,000 spots. It's an overwhelming task to basically staff the government again. And the first 100 days of this, I think, are going to be really critical in terms especially of getting the necessary Senate confirmations through the process. I have no idea what this is going to look like because, to be honest, I don't know what the Senate is going to look like in January, and I'll get to that in a minute. It would be great if the transition was fairly seamless, but again, I don't know what's going to happen. But I will say that, you know, Biden is very likely going to be held accountable to deliver on the diversity that he promised in his next administration. And also, I think he's going to have to be careful with who he selects to put through the confirmation process, because if the Republicans retain control of the Senate, he'll still need a few Republican votes, and that might make it difficult to move through anyone who is, you know, more of a progressive person. So we'll have to see what happens. All right, next slide. Okay, this is a long short list, and this isn't even the entire list, but I just wanted to give you a sampling of the names that are being considered for a lot of positions that we care about: HHS Secretary, CMS Administrator, CDC Director, and FDA Commissioner. And so I don't need to go through all of these names, but I just wanted you to see who is out there. The short list is pretty long. There's still other names who are being discussed that I've left off the list. There are probably others that we don't know about that aren't on this list as well. And I think we're all kind of just guessing based on who has been advising the campaign, or who's on the transition team, or who's on the task force. But as you can see from the names that are on here, there's a lot of great choices. A lot of these names probably look familiar. Do you want to scroll over to the next slide? There's some more names for you. I don't know, I'm not really a betting person, but I have my thoughts, but I'll keep them to myself on who we might see for HHS Secretary. But we'll follow up with you on all of that once the names are out there. All right, so Congress. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned, the polling suggested that the Democrats were going to pick up a lot of House seats. And in reality, they wound up losing seats, and the Republicans picked up seats. And I think, you know, we were talking about this internally in my office, and it looks like some of these flips to Republican were actually in districts that had been traditionally red, had kind of switched to purple in the last election, and then switched back to red now, and kind of like naturally corrected. But the thing to think about here, and I say this having worked for a moderate member of Congress in the past, that, you know, those are a dying breed, but the more moderate Democrats are kind of being squeezed out here. And I think it's something that is interesting, but it's also a little scary. And there's some of the more moderate Democrats who very narrowly won, almost lost, and there's some who weren't reelected at all. And they're kind of saying, look, you know, I think a lot of people are confusing us because we're Democrats with this very vocal progressive wing of the party, and we have to figure out some way to all coexist peacefully wherever we are on the political spectrum. So I think that, you know, Nancy Pelosi or whoever is in charge, you know, in the next election cycle is going to have to figure out a way to make everyone happy while not losing any more seats in the next cycle, because as you can see, things are pretty tight. Okay, can go to the next slide. Oh, actually, I should, well, the Senate slide's a bit of a mess. Let me get into this. I'm sure you've all heard that there was a runoff in Georgia, and as if like one runoff weren't enough, we got two because it's 2020. And so why should anything make sense? So right now, Republicans are leading in the Senate. They have a 50 to 46 majority. The Georgia runoff is scheduled for early January, and those are two Republican seats that are up for grabs. And obviously the Democrats are throwing the kitchen sink at flipping one, if not both of them. There's two independents, so if you think my math is off, sometimes it's off, but there's two independents here. And so they caucus with the Democrats. And so really the makeup, if you were to incorporate those two independents, Angus King and Bernie Sanders, it's 48 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and then you have these two Georgia seats that are hanging out there. So if both of the Democratic candidates in Georgia win those seats, the Senate would be tied at 50-50, because why not? And then Vice President Harris would cast any tie-breaking votes. So just a little bit of interesting dynamics. And that race, or the runoff, is scheduled for early January. And I don't know how long it will take to get results from that. I'll talk in a little bit about the January calendar, and we can see how it looks a little scary. All right, let's go to the next slide. Oh, actually, before I mention anything here, I should say, I want to be careful how I phrase this, but there's a couple of conservative Democratic senators who, if we have this 50-50 split, would definitely be people to watch when they might be able or might be willing to side with the Republicans. And there's some rumors going around about maybe one of them potentially flipping parties, although it's kind of a perpetual rumor, so I don't know. So I want to just put a pin in that and say, let's see where the dust settles after the Georgia elections. But just a reminder, the election cycle in the Senate, there's more seats up in 2 years. So if there were to be a tie, that would be the landscape for the next 2 years. Okay, so this slide that we're on right now, the next couple of slides, actually, there's a lot of info on there, and I don't plan to get into most of it. I just really want to put it out there so that you can have some sort of context for what else is happening in Congress that isn't entirely healthcare related, because I know we tend to get kind of in our bubble, and there's lots of other things that are vying for attention. Appropriations, Nick already discussed that. It looks like, as Nick was saying, that there is going to be an effort to get the bills out the door before the CR expires in December, which is great because we're like already into this fiscal year, but whatever. And the budget, I guess you can just ignore it because everybody else ignores the budget because it's never going to be balanced ever again. All right, next slide. There's a lot of, as you can see, there are a lot of issues on the table, but for now, I would expect that the Democratic controlled House is going to continue to move provisions that would strengthen the ACA, attempt to lower drug prices, provide likely increased funding for NIH, CDC. They would probably do that anyway, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I expect that to be even more of an effort. And then reauthorizing the FDA's drug and device user fee programs. Okay, next slide. And the Senate, we have lots going on over there. There's a maternal health package that might be coming together. Drug pricing is still on the table. You'll have user fee negotiations. You may or may not have a COVID relief package. Just to get into that, because I think a lot of people are very personally concerned about what the prospects are of a COVID relief package. I don't know what's going to happen. There is a big disagreement between Democrats and Republicans and the House and the Senate on how large of a package or how targeted of a package it should be. A lot of the more fiscally conservative Senate offices that I've spoken with have said that they are going to be put in a difficult position if they have to take a vote on something like that, because there's a lot of money that's already gone out the door. A lot of it hasn't been spent. They don't really know what has worked and what has not in terms of some of the programming, and they would like to have more of a read on that before they're asked to take these votes. It does complicate things for that group of members. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll have to see. So I just wanted to mention that. The Senate is also going to have to confirm a slate of new Biden administration officials. And I should mention that Senator Grassley, who currently chairs finance, is not going to be chairing finance in the next session. Senator Crapo is going to be taking over that committee. And also, it's not really clear right now what's happening over at the Health Committee. They have jurisdiction over also a lot of things that we care about, including the user fee legislation. And it's possible, although I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but it's possible that Rand Paul could become that committee's chairman. We are waiting to see how things shake out and whether or not that chairmanship might go to Senator Burr. But we don't know. So there's a tradition of seniority that determines who takes these committee chairmanships, and it's really not clear if Rand Paul were to be the guy, if Mitch McConnell would be willing to buck the tradition of seniority. So we need to keep an eye on that because it's concerning. I mean, the user fee legislation is a big deal. It's very important to us, and nothing against Senator Paul, but he can make things pretty difficult. So we'll have to see where it goes, and we will keep you updated. Okay, next slide. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on everything on this slide, but I wanted to be sure to list them for reference. I do want to take a minute to talk about a couple of things of particular interest to the rare community for the remainder of this year and into next year. And before I do that, I just want to caveat my comments by saying that I'm sure you've heard there are a few senators now who have either tested positive for COVID or who are quarantining. Senator McConnell actually adjourned the Senate a day early yesterday because, you know, you have to vote in person there, and folks he wasn't sure about attendance, I guess, I don't know. I'm not sure how or if the number of COVID cases right now in Congress will impact anything down the road. But it bears mentioning that there's 26 House members and 8 senators right now, including Senator Grassley, who have either tested positive or are presumed positive for COVID. In the House, House members are actually allowed under special rules to vote by proxy, but in the Senate, the members are required to vote in person. So I just want to mention that because I don't know if those numbers are going to go up or down, but if they go up, obviously that's a problem. So this year, just a couple of things to mention for the remainder of the year, aside from appropriations, the Creating Hope Act reauthorization. I know so many of us have spent so much time and focus on this right now. So the program was supposed to expire at the end of the last fiscal year, but it was kicked along in the current CR. And so it's funded through December 11th. The House already passed a 4-year reauthorization, and we're waiting on the Senate right now. I do expect it to happen. I'm hopeful it will happen. Ideally, the goal in the first place was to make the program permanent, but there were some issues with Senator Pallone over this, and he wasn't okay with the permanency issue. It's been a bit of a struggle, but there was an agreement that was struck between the bill sponsors and Chairman Pallone to drop it from permanency to 4 years. And while, you know, personally I'm disappointed and it's not what we were hoping for, I have to just remind myself it's better than nothing. And sometimes okay-ish has to be okay, and we can just continue to work on it. So I'm hopeful that will be buttoned up this year. I briefly mentioned earlier that the Senate is working on a maternal health package. The House recently did pass maternal health legislation that would, among other things, expand Medicaid coverage to 1 year for postpartum women, and currently coverage only lasts 60 days. And so, you know, while this isn't an issue that's specific to the rare disease community, I think all of us should really get behind healthy pregnancies, better maternal health outcomes, better access to technology for pre and postnatal women, healthier births, and I'm excited about that. So we'll see if they can get that done before the end of this year. But I do expect that that would then carry into 2021 if that's unable to happen this year. And drug pricing, I have no idea. I feel like it's Groundhog Day wherever I talk about drug pricing because it's constantly on the table. There's a lot of things that have happened. Not sure how meaningful a lot of those things have been. It's unclear right now if Senator Grassley is going to be able to move any pieces of the drug package that he put together earlier this year. I don't really know what's going to happen with that. I don't want to say it's totally off the table yet because I just think, you know, can't ever say never. So we're going to put a pin in that, come back to it next month and see where we are. So that's for the remainder of this year. And the next year, the big thing for us is the Prescription Drug User Fee Act. So for those of you who have not been through this process before, PDUFA is reauthorized every 5 years, and the current reauthorization runs through September 2022. And so the user fee discussions have already kicked off. They were delayed a little bit because of COVID, but this summer, FDA started meeting with external groups to get a sense of what folks might want to see in a user fee package. I've heard a little bit of feedback from those meetings, and based on that, I mean, I would definitely expect to see that there will be some policies that are tucked in there that are related to like digital health, improvement of internal processes at FDA, Probably something on enhanced FDA communication with sponsors during the drug development process. I feel like that's just a perpetual issue. Further enhancing the patient voice in the decision-making process. And then probably recruitment and retention of highly qualified staff, which is also an issue that I feel like we visit every time we reauthorize PDUFA. I would also expect the issue of gene and cell therapies to be addressed in some capacity, and potentially in terms of like providing more resources to FDA in order to review those applications, because I would expect that those will be on the increase in the next couple of years, which is great. And then I don't doubt for a minute that diversity in clinical trials will probably also be part of that discussion, along with who knows what else. We're still kind of in the earlier stages of that, but my point in mentioning this is that there will be a lot of opportunities for the rare community to weigh in during this process, and the foundation will be sure to let you all know how to do that. But it is one of the best opportunities that we regularly get to improve the drug approval pipeline for rare diseases at FDA, and to improve the resources for rare diseases. And again, we need to see what happens with the HELP committee leadership, which hasn't yet been decided, as I think that might dramatically impact the direction that some of this goes. But I am looking forward to 2021 for a lot of reasons, but mainly because it'll be a good year to get some legislative wins, I think. So stay tuned on more information about that. And then I'm gonna just leave drug prices on the list for 2021 because it's always on the list. Again, this comes up all the time. I'm not really sure what has truly been accomplished here when you really get down to it, but I think, you know, with a divided government with a likely divided government for at least the next couple of years, it makes it difficult for me to see how any massive actions in this space would get a lot of traction, but it's something we will continue to watch. Next slide. Timeline, oh yeah. So this is just for reference, just to walk through a little bit of what's gonna happen for the rest of this year, which I sort of already walked through, but just so you can visualize it. We are almost at the end of November, if you can believe it. And if you flip to the next slide, Shannon, you can see there's not a lot of time left between now and the end of this year to get some of these must-pass things taken care of, especially appropriations. So if you want to flip one more into January. Yeah, so January is going to be interesting. So Congress comes back on the 4th. The Georgia runoff is on the 5th. The joint session to count electoral votes and to certify the election results is on the 6th. And then the presidential inauguration is on the 20th. So get your wine ready because you will need it to get through January. Hopefully some more of what we could expect will come into focus so that we can better plan for what's ahead in 2021. Next slide, that might be it.
Caitlin, thank you so much, Jen. Caitlin, are there any questions for Jen on, it was a lot of information you provided, Jen.
Sorry, I feel like I just had diarrhea of the mouth. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, we had a few questions. One is, has Congress gathered on other UFAs yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and will the UFAs be combined in the FDA RA as was previously?
No idea.
Okay.
I hate to say that, but I gotta be honest, I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you anyways.
Anything else?
That is it.
Okay, perfect. Well, if anyone has questions later today after thinking about all the information that Jen provided, feel free to reach out to Shannon or Caitlin. Thank you so much, Jen. I'm just going to quickly go over some details. I know that I've already hit on this for you guys before, that we've switched our events in 2021. So that Rare Across America will happen virtually in February and March, and then Rare Disease Week hopefully in person as much as possible. In July, we are crossing our fingers. So many of you probably already received an email earlier this week that we have opened up registration for Rare Across America. So you can go ahead and register now before the holidays, get it over with. And for the first time, we have the information available in Spanish. So please share that website with others and get the word out. We want to make sure that our programs are as inclusive as possible. So our website is available in Spanish, and our registration page is in Spanish as well. And we'll have Spanish speaking materials available as well for Rare Across America. And our webinars should include transcriptions in foreign languages for Spanish too. So if you can think of anything else we can do to make this program even more inclusive, please feel free to reach out to us. For those of you who don't know, Rare Across America is an opportunity that usually happens in August during the August recess, but this year will happen right soon after the new Congress begins, the new 117th Congress. So this will be a great opportunity to meet those new members of Congress and make our voices heard at the beginning of the Congress. And RDLA schedules meetings for advocates to meet with their representative and senators. And you will meet with your representative senators virtually on March 3rd and 4th. And this is our whole schedule of events. Our first week, Rare Readiness, is really just preparing us for those virtual Hill meetings. We'll host the Fast Forward for Rare Practice Your Pitch webinar again on Wednesday, the 24th. We are co-hosting a Rare Disease Caucus briefing on Thursday, the 25th. And then the following week, NIH will have details out soon, hopefully, but you can save the date for that NIH virtual event on March 1st. And then our Hill meetings will take place on Wednesday, March 3rd, the Senate meetings. And so your meetings will take place sometime between 12 to 5 p.m. Eastern time with your senators on Wednesday the 3rd. So you can save the date on your calendar now. And then the House meetings will take place on March 4th during that same time, 12 to 5 p.m. Eastern. So you can go ahead and save the time on your calendar ahead of time. And then just a few important dates. The registration for Rare Across America will close on January 22nd so that we can start scheduling all of your meetings for you. We will host 3 training webinars. The first will be our general training webinar, where you will get all the fun details, tips for your meetings. We'll have our folks who schedule the meetings at Advocacy Associates kind of give you more details on your schedules and how to access them during that webinar. On the 9th of February, we're going to do a webinar for first-time advocates. Maybe you haven't participated in Rare Across America, or you're just a little bit new to advocacy. And that way we'll just be able to give you a little bit more time for tips and tricks for your meetings, and also for you to ask us questions. And then we'll have team leaders for the larger meetings this year. And so we'll hold a special webinar for the team leaders. On the registration form, there's a question asking if you want to be a team leader. So if you feel like you've been through this enough to help lead a team, we would love for you to volunteer and just select yes, you're interested. And if you're chosen, we will get in contact with you. And then just a reminder, our Rare Voice Awards are being held online this year on December 10th. You might have seen our social media posts on all the fabulous advocates that were nominated and are finalists for the Rare Voice Awards. And registration is still open. So we really encourage you to register and join us on December 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a really fun online event. Our team is probably working double as hard to make this event virtual than we would for an in-person event. But it's going to be lots of fun. And the first 100 registrants are getting a little event care package sent to their home so that they can have some fun goodies to watch the show. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. And then, of course, our next RDLA webinar, we usually don't host one in December, but we are going to host one in December this year, since we won't be preparing for Rare Disease Week at that time. So December 16th at noon, save the date. And of course, if you'd like to participate or have a particular topic presented on, feel free to reach out to us. We love getting suggestions. And then, of course, thank you to our partners who make our webinars possible. And I think that is it for today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we will make sure to get you the answers you need. Have a great week. Take and care. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Thank you to Jen and Nick for joining us.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you, Shannon.
Great. Thank you. Bye.